What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Grad RN podcast. I'm your host, Kati Kleber. Today, we're going to talk about a very specific situation when you're giving a report and you're dealing with someone who's really nitpicky and not cool. It's kind of a weird place to be. And I'd love to teach you a little bit more about this. Now, this is one of the lessons that I have in my little report masterclass. It is a free resource that I have, and I will go through this kind of like a lesson essentially, and I'll give you a link where you can take the full mini course and have multiple downloads. I have a report sheet database, and I have other things, and I think I like my shorthand abbreviation download, things that I think you're really going to like. It's all for free. We're going to put that link to that bad boy in the description of this episode. So this course has been around for a little while. I've had hundreds of nurses take it. Wanted to share what a couple of them said. So Nikki said Nursing Reports was really great. I can't wait to start Med-Surg Mindset. Every new nurse or anyone needing help with giving handoff reports could really use this. Kati keeps things pertinent and simple. I really appreciate the explanations. As always, I like to know the why behind pretty much everything. So thank you for being a nurse educator who really cares about helping new nurses. Yay! So got a lot of, Tony said it was very helpful. Thank you so much. Paige said the report review was helpful as I've been out of bedside for a while. Nice to provide an educational review on what to expect and how to prepare. Tyene said, I just took the NCLEX a week ago and passed. Woohoo! Trying to prepare as much as possible for my first job, and I really enjoy your teaching style. Short, to the point, no fluff. And last one from Tammy, tips on shift report was awesome, not just from the organizational perspective, but also in confidence and being prepared and then being confident. I'm currently on my Med-Surg rotation as a student, and it's going to be tremendously helpful for me in building a strong foundation. Yay! So that's the goal with all of these resources. I'm so excited that these are hitting home and moving the needle at the bedside. So there's, I can't remember how many, there's a lot more testimonials here. I will not read them all, but let's get into the lesson. So this comes from troubleshooting tough moments. So which module is this, guys? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6th module of this little free mini course, and it's one of my favorite ones because this is what we deal with. Okay, you can prepare and have everything perfect, but what if you're dealing with someone super not cool? So this often is not this big overt rude you're so stupid, why didn't you do this thing. It's more passive, and it more can come off like condescending questions. So like, why'd you do this? Wait, why didn't you do this? What is happening? This doesn't make sense. So that is how I have received it in the past, how I've observed it in the past. One of the important questions to ask yourself in those moments is, do they have a valid concern or question, even if the delivery is awful? Because sometimes these nurses are very experienced and do know what they're talking about, but it's coming in a really not cool package. So if so, I want you to mentally tag their question or concern as useful, and I want you to tag the delivery as background noise. Okay? All right. Martha had a really good point here. Yeah, that's actually really helpful. And she was kind of rude, but whatever. This was actually a good point. It kind of takes the sting out of it a little bit. Sometimes, though, it is not useful or helpful. So keep that in mind, too. That can all just be background noise. And it doesn't need to be something that you carry with you out of the hospital after your shift. Sometimes nurses in report will phrase questions. They're questioning the entire medical team's decision making, not necessarily yours. So keep that in mind. So if they're like, wait, why didn't they do an EKG? Why did they do a thrombectomy? I'm confused. And you know what? Sometimes you're not going to have answers to those questions. Even as an experienced nurse, I would be giving report, and I'd have an offgoing nurse ask a question. I don't know the answer to that. And honestly, sometimes really didn't make a difference in the care going forward, whether or not they made that decision. So important to like, you're the messenger, and I don't want you to allow yourself to get shot, if that makes sense. Like, don't shoot the messenger. Like, don't like absorb blame where it's not really yours. And sometimes a lot of nurses, especially if you're newer on a unit, don't realize how they come off. Like, they don't realize that they've got a rude face or a rude delivery. So also keep that in mind. So here's kind of how I recommend how to handle these situations. So if you start to feel the heat rising in your face of somebody being like super duper rude to you and condescending or whatever, first I want you to regulate your own emotions. I don't want you to suppress them. I don't want you to let them all out. I want you to regulate them. Okay? So acknowledge what you're feeling in your brain. Okay, I feel she's getting really nitpicky. I feel kind of embarrassed that I don't know these answers. Just acknowledging that can bring the temperature in your internal temperature down from a 10 to maybe a 7. Okay. I want you to remember and tell yourself that other people have to deal with this too, and you are not alone. That can bring us from a 7 to like a 4. Okay. And then I want you to tell yourself, I've got this. I can do it. Okay. Acknowledge the feeling. Remind yourself you're not alone. Give yourself a little pep talk. You can do that in moments in your brain. Okay. This will regulate your stress response so that you can really lean into the moment instead of being nervous and scared. Okay. So there are a lot of people who are on autopilot and have no idea how they come across and will speak grumpy to whoever they can. And sometimes we need to just have a gentle pushback. Again, it doesn't need to be a sit down, that's very unprofessional. I don't like the way that you are speaking to me. Okay, that sounds great in a textbook. Not so much when you're dealing with humans, right? And you're building rapport and trust and whatever. In the same mentality of, you know how when you're using restraints on a patient, you want to use the least invasive intervention to, achieve your goal. Same thing here. We want to use the least amount of kind of like pushback to get them to chill. Okay. So the goal isn't for them to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was being so terrible to you and you're a wonderful nurse and please forgive me. That's not a realistic goal. Okay. We just want them to stop or like not be nitpicky and not be rude. So let's have gentle pushbacks to kind of stand our own ground so that we're not going to let ourselves get bulldozed, especially after we just spent a whole shift running around and not sitting down. Okay. You worked hard. We're going to not let it get nitpicked. Okay. So some gentle pushback can look like, maybe they're asking you a question that you don't know the answer to. And you'd be like, you know what? That's a fair question. I'm actually not sure. If they are upset with you for not doing X, Y, and Z, and you knew you needed to, you just genuinely didn't have time, you could say, you know what, I didn't have time to get to that. I actually had some other pretty pressing priorities. But once you're settled and situated, that can be completed whenever, it's whenever it needs to be. A simple, no, I did not get that done. And if they're asking you for information, to rattle off a bunch of information that is readily in the chart, but you just don't have memorized because you started with 5 patients, discharged 4 of them, and got 3 back, and you're can't remember what's what. You can say, you know what, I documented that earlier, I checked that earlier. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it's in the chart. And not responding like mousy, like crumbly, apologetic, like that kind of thing. Here's a caveat though, guys. This is for when you're working hard and doing what you need to do. If you slacked all shift, you didn't get stuff done. If you had orders from 2 hours ago that you just left there because you didn't want to deal with them, I'm not talking to you right now. This is for the nurse who is on top of it, who's got their stuff done, who's not trying to pass stuff off on the next shift. Does that make sense? Chances are, though, if you're watching or listening to this, you are not that nurse who is trying to get away with doing the least amount possible. You're actually on the other side of things where you're doing way too much and need to chill a little bit and remember that this is continuity of care and you can't figure out, or you can't necessarily do every little thing for every patient on every shift. Okay. So that was my important caveat. Now, also remember that not all questions and comments from the the oncoming nurse are necessarily bad. You know, we're new. If you are new and you're still really getting your feet wet in this position, you may not have realized things. Like, you really should have done something differently. That's why at the top of this, I was like, is this useful information, but it's just coming in a rude package? Or are they actually being pretty kind with how they're delivering it? And I'm that embarrassed that I didn't do X, Y, and Z. Here's an example. I've probably mentioned this before, taking over for a nurse, right at shift change. She got a bunch of orders at once, a bunch of them. Of course, a physician rounds right before shift change and all that. Well, one of her patients lost IV access. He was hypoglycemic. He was nonverbal and not able to take in oral intake. So it's not like she could give this guy juice, call it a day. The guy needed IV dextrose. Another patient had potassium replacement for a critical potassium level. She had to do both of those things. She got both of those orders at the same time. And in that situation, in her new nurse brain, she went with the K writer first. Now, when I got, I'm trying to figure out how I want to say this. When I got report, though, it was like, oh boy, we have a patient who has who's actively hypoglycemic with no IV access. That is more of a priority than we do have a critical lab value. Now, it wasn't like they have no potassium. It fell within the critical lab value thing of, yes, this needs to get addressed pretty within the next 30 minutes kind of thing. But we have a guy with a blood sugar of 40 or whatever it was and with no access. That was a teaching moment where I'm sure it maybe didn't feel so great and she was trying her hardest. But hey, I love that you're like trying to figure out what the best is and you went with your instinct. Let's chat why maybe this would have been a little bit better. We're optimizing here. Like, we have a guy that needs an IV right now. Let's go do that real quick. So it is important to, especially if you're new, not necessarily a new nurse, but new to your unit. Oh boy, let me be open to maybe I'm missing something here. And they don't always come in a bad package. It can just feel that bad in the moment. And that is why regulating your initial emotional response is key, because you're going to recognize in the moment, okay, pull it down from I'm a terrible nurse and I'll never get this right to, wait a minute, I was trying my best. I made the wrong call. I can see why I should have done it differently. Let me carry that into the future. All right, work is done. Let me go to the next thing. Like, it kind of helps you or not de-escalate, but not over-identify with your mistakes. Okay. So that's why I really want you to hone into that emotional regulation at the identification of a mistake. Okay. Because that's when we really feel that heat to rise in our face. So I hope that is really helpful there. And if you, I want to figure out how I want to say this. So sometimes you will have people ask you questions that you don't know the answer to, that you really should know the answer to. Like, is this patient on bed rest or not? Or can they eat? Or this is a cardiac patient who's had low potassiums. What is their potassium level? Like, maybe that probably should be written on your report sheet. Like, those kind of things. It's important in those moments to maintain honesty and just like being forthright with, what, I'm not sure. Because you don't want to improvise. You don't want to fake it, because then people don't trust what you have to say. And nurses are great at reading people and they can tell when you're BSing them. So if you don't know something, I just be honest with it. And my great talking point, I say great, I think it's great, I hope you think it's great, is opening the door for them to educate you about it. And this is key, especially when people are off of orientation. When you're on orientation, it's kind of like this green light accepted, hey, this person is newer, let's teach. If they're off orientation, you have no idea how long they've been off orientation. You don't know if this is like, hey, is the door open for me to educate? Because then we're starting to step on like professional toes and whatnot. And you don't want to be condescending to somebody who's just having a rough moment, or like, you know, explain something that should be kind of obvious, that might be obvious, but they are very well aware. So my talking point is, hey, you know what? I'm still learning the ropes here. I'm kind of new. I'm sorry if I missed this. I can see why this is important. Can you tell me the way that you would walk through this situation? Because I don't want to make that mistake again, or I don't want to miss that again. Like, just that is so basic, but it's very powerful in the, hey, I'm new here, newish. I'm still learning. Can you walk me through how you would have handled this? And when you do that in a genuine and a sincere way, people love that. People love to teach others. Hello, I'm teaching you right now. I'm loving this. If you can open that door for people to kind of give them permission to educate you on that hey, we're on the same team here. Can you help me out? It's really powerful. Now, here's the deal though. You do have people who are consistently unprofessional and not cool. And that can take a little bit more of like a straight up business like tone of like, I'm not going to be bullied here. I know I'm new, but that doesn't mean you can like haze me. So I have a few talking points for that too. And these are all written out in this module of this course. You know what? I'm doing my best here. Seems like you're frustrated or upset with something that I'm doing. Is that what's going on? And just did you feel the silence? You just don't over explain yourself. Make an observation, not an accusation. See, subtle difference. Hey, I'm trying right here. I'm trying my best here, and it feels like you might be upset with me about something. Is that what's going on? Right? You're saying I feel this. Not you're being mean, but I feel that you're frustrated with me. Is that true? Like, and you can give them a chance to clarify. Hey, you know what? Actually, it's not. I didn't get the sleep I needed. My dog woke me up. My blah blah blah. Or whatever. Here's another one. I'm noticing that whenever I try to give you a report, you seem pretty upset. Or let me start over. I notice that whenever I try to give you a report, you seem upset with how I'm doing it or what I'm saying. Is everything okay? Again, observation. I'm noticing that you don't like what I'm doing here. I'm getting the impression you're upset with me based on the way that you're talking to me here. Is everything okay? And then sometimes I like to make it into a joke. If you have a little bit more of a playful personality, you can, dang, Diane, you okay? You seem a bit grumpy, like frustrated today. Is everything okay? You're just like a little like, you really need to read people, and some people might not like that one. But like, if you can read it and like, if you can make it into a little bit of a joke of them, then that can also break the tension a little bit and, help navigate that situation, because it's like, hey, I want to acknowledge that you're not being cool to me right now. And I'm not just going to let you like be condescending and like nitpicky to me for no reason. So often when you can objectively describe behavior, remember we're making an observation, not an accusation, that can get that autopilot grump to snap out of it. Okay. If they're more than a grump and like genuinely mean, because nurses are people too. You're going to run into mean nurses. That's what's going to happen. Like, as you would in literally any job. We want to give them the hint, like, all right, you can be a mean person, but you're not going to be like straight up mean to my face and not get a little pushback. Because then you're not as fun to push your buttons, and they're probably not going to do it anymore. But you may also run into people who are kind of passive aggressive, and they're going to be nice and sweet and overly love bomby to your face, but talk about you behind your back. Not cool. I mean, that, like, to me is like worse. Just be rude to my face and then let's hash it out and like, but I don't, ugh. So my advice when you have those passive aggressive people is to, first of all, train your brain not to care. Okay. Remember, this is a rude person at work. They're not your best friend. They're not your mother, your boyfriend, your best friend's girlfriend, whatever it might be, or someone you have to spend a lot of personal time with. Um, this is the grumpy person you encounter at work. So who cares if that rude, grumpy, passive aggressive person does or doesn't like you? Like, I think having the courage to be disliked and being comfortable in your own skin is pretty powerful, because you aren't going to control this person. You're not going to control what they say behind your back. But chances are, if they're the passive aggressive person, a lot of people on the unit feel the same. I think back to people that I have encountered where they would be sweet as honey to your face and then really not cool behind your back. And everybody knew that about that person, and they couldn't trust them. And they, didn't have a lot of friends. They had a lot of people who were cordial with them, but they didn't have a lot of like genuine, hey, I got your back people. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's an accomplishment or a testament to your character if you can get this like passive aggressive rude person to love you. Not so much, right? Fair enough. So, if Lisa is gonna like roll her eyes about you, who cares? Like, get out of here, Lisa. Oh, that's just like whatever. You know what I mean? So I think the assertiveness muscle is necessary to flex in this situation, not the aggressive and not the passive, but just being assertive can help work turn into something doable, where you go in and you're there to do work. You're not there to be Lisa's BFF and get validated because she likes you. Don't worry about Lisa, okay? We don't need rude Lisa to like be our like buddy, okay? We're there to do what we need to for the patients, have good rapport with our colleagues, and go home, right? So I hope that's helpful. Those are my troubleshooting for tough moments during report situations things. So this, like I said, is part of my Nursing Report Masterclass. This is part of like a bigger package that I have full of free stuff for nurses. So they're mainly for new grads. For those of you newer to a hospital situation, we go over some basics. It's part of my new graduate toolkit. Completely free. I've got little mini courses in there. Like I mentioned before, this little mini course of report has top abbreviations that, like, I actually thought of all of the things that I would write on the report sheet, like shorthand, and I put them on a sheet. It's not like your approved abbreviation from Jaco, but this is what made sense to my brain, written down on a piece of paper, practically used at the bedside. I also have a mini report sheet database where I have some different report sheets that I've used, that other people have used and sent me, and I've included them there. Now, I might change this, but as of today, I also have my How to Handle AFib with RVR mini course. So that is, when someone flips into atrial fibrillation with a rapid ventricular response, it's not a code, but it's also not like, oh, they're tacky, let's get them on metoprolol. It's a situation you need to address, like an urgent situation. And one that in the hospital I found is a little bit more common. And if you can have a few pieces of information under your belt, you can feel so much more confident in that setting. So I got a little mini course on that. It's got 4 lessons. It's got multiple downloads. And I even have, guys, I'm super excited about this one, an EKG interpretation cheat sheet. So it's a very nice PDF of EKGs. Again, 100% free. Guys, sometimes I'm like, why am I throwing all this free stuff in here? But, I want you guys to be successful. And another course I have in here is my very popular, thousands of people have taken this one, my ICU drips for beginners. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 modules. I start off by I pretend you don't know anything about ICU drip. You don't even know what a drip is. And that's where we're starting from. 5 lessons. You're going to feel a lot better. Little drip chart, little summary. I even have a conscious neuroassessment mini course as well. That bad boy's 4 lessons. And I have my PDF ebook. So I have mine on imposter syndrome. I have the first chapter of my book, Becoming Nursey. And then I also have nursing student mistakes, the top mistakes that nursing students make, how to just not do that. So this is all in my lovely little report, or I'm sorry, new nurse toolkit. You can get access to that bad boy for free. Yes, for free. So, link to that in the description of this episode. Leave me some feedback. Let me know what you think. What is it like for you giving report? Have you had situations like this? Do you have any tips for nurses, coping with this kind of a situation? Would love to hear that. Remember to do all the things of the likes, the subscribes, the shares, all that stuff is lovely and very helpful. So thanks guys, and stay fresh.